right, good evening. A quorum being present, I call this meeting of the Tewksbury Conservation Commission to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes, but we don't have any new minutes to approve. So before we really begin, I will just make comment that we have a much bigger crowd than normal, and we appreciate you all being here. All right. Agenda item A, so this is public meeting, notice of intent, Civil Design Consultants, Inc. of Andover, Massachusetts, on behalf of Yvonne Cormier, Vale Street, Assessors Map 112, lots 23, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, DP file number 305-1154. Could I have a motion to continue this notice of intent until June 7th, 2023?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. I feel like if there's only three of us, all counts, but.
Well, everyone's gonna talk now.
Yeah. All right.
Don't be shy, can you amp up the volume a little?
I'm not sure if I can amp up the volume. I'll move my mic closer. All right. Minor modification, agenda item B, minor modification, Water and Wetland LLC of Upton, Massachusetts, on behalf of the town of Tewksbury, Long Pond, DP file number 305-1007. Is there anybody here for that? Not, oh.
I'm familiar with well.
Could you come up and introduce yourself?
Just, you can just sit right.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Scott Conrad. I work for Water and Wetland. I'm an aquatic biologist with them.
And what are you presenting? What's the minor modification?
The minor modification is adding Clearcast to the already existing permit. This is to better treat water chestnut, which is an invasive plant species that's found in Long Pond.
And water chestnut, is that, I always thought they were lily pads, but they're kind of groups of them or something?
So it's actually very different. They have little triangular shaped leaves that sprout up from the bottom. They send up a shoot from the bottom and they float on the surface. But they produce turions that have barbs off of them that can stick to waterfowl and also injure people's feet and things like that.
All right, anything else before we?
We were also looking to extend the current OOC as well.
So that is technically under a different agenda item, so we'll only be discussing the minor modification for right now, but we'll get to that in a second. All right, Joe, do you have any questions or comments?
Just some comments. So the existing order of conditions for Long Pond was issued a few years ago, and it was for the general maintenance of water quality in Long Pond. So that involves the application of algicides, herbicides, and mechanical removal of water chestnut. So now that this permit is nearing the end of its life, as we'll talk about later, Water and Wetland had made some new suggestions as far as treatment of invasive species, which included water chestnut. So rather than mechanical raking, they had suggested the application of Clearcast, which wasn't previously addressed in the existing permit, so hence it's a minor modification. So the order did allow for like the general application of approved herbicides and algicides. So this is just another one, but it just figured it would be good just for them to kind of let the commission know about this new application, this new chemical treatment. That's it.
All right, any questions or comments from the commission? All right, so if that's the case, could I have a motion to approve the minor modification for Water and Wetland LLC of Upton, Massachusetts, DEP file number 305-1007?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. All right, now, agenda item C, request to extend an order of conditions, Water and Wetland LLC of Upton, Massachusetts, on behalf of Town of Tewksbury, Long Pond, DEP file number 305-1007. And could you please introduce yourself for the record again?
My name is Scott Conrad. I'm an aquatic biologist for Water and Wetland.
And just any reason for the extension of the order of conditions?
So the request is so that we can better, so that we can continue to manage Long Pond and better the water quality for the town and for the environment as well.
All right. Joe, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I believe the request is for another 3 years, just because that's the maximum you can extend it for. And again, this is for like long-term maintenance and management of Long Pond water quality. I believe this permit was, it expires in September 2023. So just trying to get ahead of the game and extend it another 3 years from there.
Do you have any idea if, if we approve this extension, would there be another extension? Or do you expect the treatment to be done by that point?
We may need to extend it longer, but it'll depend on the environmental issues that are occurring in the pond at that point in time.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments from the commission? All right, in that case, could I have a motion to approve the request to extend an order of conditions for Water and Wetland LLC of Upton, Massachusetts, DEP file number 305-1007?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. All right, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You're off the hot seat.
All right. We have another request to extend an order of conditions, this time for Patricia Donahue, 60 Shawshene Ave, Tewksbury, Massachusetts, Assessors Map 112, Lot 69, DEP file number 305-1110. Is there anybody here for that? Could you please come up and introduce yourself?
Patricia Donahue?
And what is the nature, just can you fill us in
Yeah,
with details?
I had originally been approved to go ahead and put a house on this property, and just had a variety of different conditions, you know, that happened, and so I decided to sell the property, and I do have people that have purchased it, but with the conditions that I'm able to get an extension for them to construct a smaller than originally anticipated house that I was gonna put in there, which they're gonna go through their approvals and so forth, but they wanted me to have the responsibility to, you know, get an extension to make sure that they had enough time to do what they need to do.
All right. Joe, do you have any questions or comments?
So just a few comments. So I went out to the site. The site is an excavated area. There are perimeter sediment controls up. It's right next to the Shawshene. So there's no evidence of like adverse impacts to the adjacent wetlands and the stream. But just when construction is going to start again, we'd likely have the owner at that time just revamp sediment controls. But I don't see an issue with extending the order.
Yeah, they were aware of it, just
Yeah.
because, you know, it got snowed on and got pushed down, so.
Yeah.
I had verbally, you know, relayed that, and they're aware of that, so they'd have that fixed, and I guess make the call to have you come out and make a peek.
Is your request for a 2-year extension?
I think that they're ready to go. I mean, I think one is sufficient. I mean, it doesn't hurt for me to ask for two, but I don't want that to be detrimental to the case. But from what I understand, they're ready to get going on things. So I think 1 year would be sufficient, but whatever, you know, you decide upon.
I mean,
I don't
I'm
know if it
fine
makes
with
a
the 2 years just to play it safe. If anybody,
We're gonna approve
Else.
it, you know, I'd say 2
Yeah.
also,
Yeah.
because you never know what's going on in this climate.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, from what I'm aware, it's a contractor, and he's helping his son build it. So it sounds to me like he's ready to get going on things, so.
Yeah, I would recommend at least two, just so we don't run into this issue a year from now.
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
not everyone keeps track of their permit expiration dates.
Exactly. Unforeseen circumstances.
All right, if there's no more questions or comments from the commission, could I have a motion to approve the request to extend an order of conditions for Patricia Donahue, 60 Shawshene Avenue, Tewksbury, Massachusetts, Assessors Map 112, Lot 69, DEP file number 305-1110, as discussed at this meeting?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
All right. Agenda item E, emergency certification, Empire Construction of Tewksbury, Massachusetts, 60 Country Club Drive, Tewksbury, Massachusetts, Assessors Map 13, Lot 16. Is there anybody here for that? Not seeing anybody?
I think it's a
Joe, do you have any details you can fill us in on?
Yep. So 60 Country Club Drive applied to tie into town sewer. They were located within 100 feet of a wetland, hence they required a permit with the Conservation Commission. However, they had presented a failed Title V inspection of their septic system, so they had a failed septic system. Subsequently, the health department issued an order to tie into the municipal sewer system, which allowed me to issue emergency certification with the following conditions. Number one, install a silt fence and/or straw wattle adjacent to the area of construction such that erosion of disturbed soil is not deposited within wetland resource areas. The silt fence and/or straw wattle is to be installed prior to beginning construction activities. And number two, coordinate with the conservation agent once a silt fence and/or straw wattle is installed and prior to beginning construction activities. The conservation agent shall approve of the silt fence/straw wattle location and installation. But basically, the wetlands were across the street, so it's not too much of a threat of, adverse impacts to wetland resource areas due to the work, but
All right, any
That's it.
questions or comments from the commission? Seems pretty straightforward.
Yep.
In that case, could I have a motion to approve the emergency certification?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. All right, another emergency certification for Martell Crane Service and Tree Removal of Billerica, Massachusetts, 65 Pine Street, Tewksbury, Massachusetts, Assessors Map 45, Lot 53. Is there anybody here for that? Not seeing anybody?
Yeah, I think it's another Joe thing.
Yeah, could you fill us in on the details?
So I was called out to the site to look at some trees that the homeowner was looking to remove. Some of these trees were located within jurisdictional areas. Based off of the tree's conditions and its proximity to roadways and the dwelling, it seemed appropriate to not hold up the homeowner from getting the trees cut. So hence I issued the emergency certification to allow this work with the following conditions. So the trees shall be cut at the main stump. No stump grinding is allowed. And number two, all tree debris shall be taken off-site and properly disposed of. I guess I have more, sorry. Number three is any heavy machinery used for the tree removal shall be appropriately staged in an upland area. Number four is that the contractor or the homeowner must photograph the area after work is completed and send said photographs to the conservation agent to verify work was completed in accordance with this emergency certification.
Any questions or comments from the commission?
Straightforward.
All right, in that case, could I have a motion to approve the emergency certification?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. All right, and finally, item agenda G, a violation notice for Fabio Lima and Isabella Andreza, 237 River Road, Assessors Map 27, Lot 19, and I'm understanding that they want to continue this to a specific meeting, or just, do you want to take it one week at a time?
They just have informed me that they're on vacation, so there wasn't an opportunity since the last meeting to coordinate with them and visit the site and kind of talk about how to bring everything back to compliance. So
All right,
give it another, just continue it to the next one.
all right.
That's what I'd recommend.
So we'll just continue it to the next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. All right, now for new business. Joe, you have a few things for this.
Yeah, so I think the first one that we can talk about is just tree cutting in general. And especially this time of year, tree cutting is happening, and technically, within 100 feet of a wetland, it requires a permit. So my experience so far as a practical way of enforcing this is, whenever I see active cutting or someone calls me out to the site to look at trees that have been cut recently without a permit, requiring them to kind of file an after-the-fact RDA, because they're not getting our blessing on whether it's okay to cut the trees or whether to evaluate it as an emergency certification. But I guess I just wanted to bring that up to see if that's how the commission also thinks that I should be enforcing that.
So I think there needs to be some sort of process in place for how to handle this and without, we're only technically missing one commission member, but hopefully we'll have two fairly soon. But essentially, like there are people who are gonna intentionally or innocently cut down trees, not realizing that they should have gotten a permit. And I would imagine most of those are circumstances in which, like, we would have approved it, regardless. It may have been erosion controls and similar things about, not letting trucks go into the wetlands and proper placement and stuff. But overall, it's going to be a fairly standard issue. It's just happening after the fact.
Yeah.
I don't see any issue with allowing, they just have to, submit the filing afterwards and not that big of a deal. It's when it's within one of the 25-foot or 50-foot, no disturb zones that we would be more concerned. But what are your thoughts on it?
I agree with that, but there are people that are just gonna whack them down and,
Yeah. And I think, like, for people who just know that they should have gotten it and don't, and then go in and something in the wetlands, then like maybe that's a point that we would have to issue a enforcement order with a replication plan. But overall, I haven't seen that happen too often, so I'm not like super worried about anybody doing that.
what's your take, Joe? Because you're front line on that.
Yeah. Well, it's, from a practical perspective, it's, there's so many trees that get cut, and I'm just a one-man person that kind of
Right.
has to be the eyes and ears, so that's why it's been, if I am called out to a site, I'm going to, that's how it's been. If I'm called out to a site, then I follow the letter of the law, so to speak.
Are you okay continuing this way? What's going on? I mean,
Yeah,
you don't see any giant improvement or something that we could do?
Potentially, I mean, I don't know if it's larger than this conversation, but yeah, I don't, like, what's frustrating, I guess, is that, yes, it is required. Anything within 100 feet is our jurisdiction, requires a permit, including tree cutting. But, sometimes it's tough. A tree 99 feet away, but it is what it is.
Yeah, so
Okay.
in those circumstances, would you be comfortable with, like, I guess, like, if it's 75, or maybe it's 50 feet to 100 feet away, we give Joe, the discretion to decide whether they have to, pull a full RDA or NOI, or can he just, approve a limited number of trees?
Is that something we have to change the bylaw to reflect?
So, I'm not complaining, like, I'm perfectly fine enforcing that 100-foot boundary, because you gotta call it somewhere.
But sometimes it's impractical.
Yes. So I would say in the interim, to keep it how I've been doing it until there's like a formal, like, policy or something of that nature that we make sure is like legally good.
Understood.
Yeah.
The only comment I have is, Joe goes to a site with a safety factor. I have full confidence in Joe.
Oh, and so do we, because
Yeah.
it's a health issue, it's an emergency
Yeah.
certification.
Especially for
Yeah,
emergency.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
so we've got the structure there.
Yeah. I just wanna make sure people trying to do the right thing
Are not penalized?
Yeah,
yeah, and people doing the wrong thing are it's just decentivized appropriately.
Understood.
Incentivized and incentivized. Okay, that sounds good. So, the second new business item is related to 55 Memory Lane. There was just some fill placed in that area. And if we recall, the commission issued a permit back in December 2021 for the demolition of a home, which didn't include, the addition of fill onto the property. So I have subsequently gone out to the site, kind of inspected the area, see where the fill is relative to nearby wetlands. It looks like it's actually mostly outside of jurisdictional areas, but I did meet with the homeowner's contractor to kind of discuss sediment controls, where to place them, and where to rake back some of that fill so that's at least outside of our jurisdiction. So the contractor's been, I met out with him today. He said he's going to install the sediment controls, and I'll check back in with him within a week or so, no issues.
yeah, that was, seeing these images, that's, I think, erosion control is the
Yeah.
biggest issue, and getting it out of our jurisdiction. Any other
Yep.
comments on that
I
one?
have
or-
none.
All right.
I'm good.
Joe's on top of it, so.
So the last new business item is discussing a phrase in the regulations.
I have so many thoughts on this one.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. All right, so in the Wetland Protection Act, in the Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act, and the Tewksbury Wetland Protection Bylaw, installing fences is an exempt activity, provided it does not pose a barrier to wildlife movement. Which is not, that phrase, barrier to wildlife movement is not further defined in the bylaw or in the Wetland Protection Act. So when someone asks me, what does that imply? I think in the past, what I've said is that it implies that the fence board needs void spaces within it, or there needs to be space between the ground and the fence board. So I've generally said, 4 to 6 inches, or 6 inches probably. But that's kind of been my interpretation, but it's obviously more appropriate to get the commission's interpretation of that.
So my only concern with making, it have to be 4 to 6 inches above the ground is that a lot of people, they have fences so they can keep their dogs and cats within their yard and they can't escape, and that would obviously allow a lot of animals to get out. So That's my biggest issue with like, if we were to come down hard and say, no, it has to, be 6 inches above the ground, that would pose a risk to a lot of animals, in town and stuff. I don't think this is going to affect the vast majority of fences in town, because if a fence entirely encloses an area of the property, yes, it creates a barrier for an animal to go through, but if they're moving, if they're migrating somewhere, they're just gonna go around the fence and continue on their way. I'm worried about those, and I think it would be a pretty rare circumstance in which an animal is prevented from getting to a
Critical resource.
a critical resource area, like I don't know what their breeding grounds are, or, a pond that they may live in. And if that's entirely enclosed, and then they have to travel somewhere else,
That's fair.
Though in that case, it's not that you couldn't have a fence, it would just have to be a fence that does allow animals to go under or over and stuff. I was
So
out
you're-
running and.
You're looking more of it from like not within the design of the fence, but more of like where it lies relative to other resource areas and stuff.
Yes.
So like
because-
if it's built within like an existing lawn, regardless of the design, it doesn't pose.
Because even, like, so, I was thinking about this so much because I was running and looking at all of the fences I saw, and, like, there are areas of town in which a lot of people have connected fences, and that would be pretty difficult for an animal to navigate, but at the same time, I think there's less animals in those areas of town that are that much more densely packed with people and houses and stuff. So it's like and then there's also people who just have privacy fences where it's not connected to anything, it's just a wall, so your neighbors can't, look at you while you're out in your pool or something like that. And again, they can just go around the fence, it's not that big of a deal. It's those, I think, rare circumstances in which you'd physically be preventing like a deer from being able to jump over, and for whatever reason they couldn't go around, they'd essentially be stuck in that area.
Okay.
No, I agree. The only thing I see, like you say, a lot of people put fences up just to keep their pets in,
Yeah. I
And you
certainly
don't want to be, little dogs getting under it.
Right, I
Now-
mean, because you're putting the domestic animals at risk also.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So how does that fit in? Have you had to decide on anything recently about like plans for different types of fences
Well,
and
it's just
stuff?
if someone asks me, hey, can I install a fence in my yard within 100 feet of the wetland? I read off the regulation basically. And, then that phrase comes up, and it's a discussion of what
Yeah.
that actually means, because that's a very confusing phrase,
Yeah,
especially if it's not further defined. So I guess for me, I just need to know, and the interpretation of the regulations is with the commission, so that's why I'm asking. So I just need to know where to draw the line as far as what's okay, what's not, for example. So it sounds like most would be okay. I can't really think of one where that would be the case.
And like we said, most people are encapsulating their backyards with these fences.
yeah,
So wildlife shouldn't be in their backyard trying to get to the water or a resource. I mean, and I hate to say this, but some of this is common sense of the situation.
I was gonna say, I'd leave it up to Joe's discretion.
Yeah, I think,
You know.
I think common sense here dictates.
So, okay, that's fair.
yeah. If you go to a property and there's a pond that has hundreds of turtles and they're trying to get an anti-turtle fence, then I don't think that would be allowed. But
Give us a call.
yeah, bring that to our attention. I would like to see that pond.
I guess for now, if it's just within existing yard, then,
Yep.
all right, fair enough.
Any other new business?
That's it. Oh, wait, sorry, I actually do have one that I didn't list. So because of our new permitting process, that's all online new permitting process. I'm now notified of physical alteration permits from the DPW, which are related to driveways. Which has previously not been something that I get to look at. So normally it's just sewer connections, water connections, and then, all building department, whether there's like additions, for example. So that's fine. I think that's fine that I can look at the driveway permits. But I guess my common sense approach to the handling driveways is a lot of times it's just people trying to repave the existing driveway. So I would think that that's something that regardless of where it is fine. It is exempt in the Wetland Protection Act. It's not specifically called out in our bylaw, but
And it's already existing essentially.
it's already existing.
Yep.
So what I think might be appropriate to permit is expansion of driveways.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if they're just replacing a driveway, then, yeah, but if they're expanding it in any way, then I think we might need to be notified, or, yeah, maybe it is a full permit for it.
Yeah, so I was,
Has that come up a lot, since the online permitting?
well, decent amount. None have been within a jurisdictional area, the expansions.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah,
That's the last thing for me.
that's the last thing. All right, so, this has been a fairly quick meeting, and there was no public meetings, on the agenda, but I will open it up to the public for at least a few minutes. If anybody would like to get up, I just ask that you go to that podium, and I will enforce that you have to, well, actually, if you're under 18, then you don't have to give your address, but your name for the record would be appreciated.
My name is Desma Curris. I live on Washington Street. Could you explain for the scouts exactly what your rule is? I heard a lot about 100 feet from wetlands. What do you guys do?
All right, I'm gonna try to take this one and then probably let Joe, correct me on a bunch of stuff. So the Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a law, the Department of, what is it? I'm blanking right now.
Department of Environmental Protection.
Yes, which means that every town needs to have a conservation commission. I learned the hard way that it used to be only a thing that was for the coastal towns. So when you look at DEP file numbers, we are 305, Tewksbury's 305, Blorka is 119, or 109, I think. Chelmsford, do you know Chelmsford off the top of your head?
I don't.
But the coastal towns all are 1 through 70 something, or maybe 90 something, and then they open it up to all of the other towns, so then it restarts. So there might be some towns that start with A that are, in the 100s. But it's basically a series of laws that say we have to protect the wetlands of Massachusetts. So we have our own bylaws on top of the Wetlands Protection Act, and it's really just, I don't want to say guidelines because they are fully enforceable laws, but it's a series of laws saying what you can and cannot do within certain zones, depending on how wet the land is. And Joe, how was I wrong with that?
That was good, that was great. So yeah, just kind of what Dan said,
Massachusetts Wetland Protection Act gives local conservation commissions the authority to interpret, administer, and enforce the state law, and also the ability to enforce their own local bylaws formed under the Home Rule Act, I believe. So for Tewksbury, what's regulated under our town bylaw that isn't covered in the state Wetland Protection Act is our 25-foot no disturb zone and our 50-foot no build zone. So anything within 100 feet of a wetland is within the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction to regulate. And so 25 feet no disturb zone was established, I think, in the early 2000s, basically just heavily restricting activity within 25 feet of the wetland. And then the 50-foot no build zone is no structures within 50 feet of a wetland edge. So the reason the buffer zone is protected is because it helps maintain proper functions of wetland resource areas, so such as wetlands. So in addition to wetlands, we also protect perennial streams, intermittent streams, floodplain, vernal pools. Yeah, I think that's most of it. Sorry, there's a little bit of a ramble. But.
Thank you.
On top of that, not so much for Joe, he does a lot more, but like, we also review notice of intents and RDAs, which, oh man, help me out, what's an RDA?
Request for determination of applicability.
Yes, it's right there in front of me. But basically, like, a notice of intent is just you fill out the permit and we get to review the plans, and we kind of like, we'll get a plot plan of the property and where the wetlands are, where the 25-foot and 50-foot zones are, and we kind of come to a conclusion whether, yes, we agree that this is an appropriately sized project, and whether, they can do it safely. And there's typically a lot of order conditions that we put on the order, saying stuff like what size erosion controls they'll have to put on and stuff. So it's, just reviewing a lot of documents.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
What do you need to know?
Either.
Name?
Just
Henry
your name.
Crisco, 12 Charlotte Road in Tewksbury. Credit card number? DNA sample. Maybe you could tell the scouts, like, I'm thinking, how big a square area, how miles, how big is Tewksbury, and what percentage of that is wetlands? Like, we get the Shawshene River, like, running through us, like, what percentage is wetlands as compared to the whole thing at Tewksbury, or?
I mean, perhaps Joe can give more square footage. My understanding is that Tewksbury is actually a pretty wet town. There are a considerable amount of wetlands, and that actually, what that means for us is that a lot more people end up having to come to us because, 100 years ago, you just built whatever, and most people would want to build on the best piece of property, which is probably going to be drier than, anything else you can find. And now that land is becoming, or buildable land is becoming more scarce, that's when, where 100 years ago, they just wouldn't have built there. Now they're going to this piece of land that can still be built on, but just needs more, oversight on how they build it and stuff. So that's where we come in. But as far as square footage, I don't know.
I don't know percentages, but I echo Dan's comments that there are a lot of wetlands in town or just jurisdictional areas, including floodplain, a riverfront area which extends 200 feet from the edge of a perennial stream. So more often than not, like when I go out to a site for a building permit, for example, there's a good chance that they'll file.
Yeah.
I'm currently looking at, I think I'm on the wrong one.
Yeah, there's publicly available maps, specifically Mass Mapper is a state website where you can load aerial imagery from, or that covers Tewksbury in addition to maps of wetlands, streams, floodplain, and it covers a considerable amount of Tewksbury.
Yeah, it seems like there is a lot of wetlands, for sure, so, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any question? As I mentioned before, I'll save that comment for afterwards. All right.
So I just state my name.
Yep.
Ian Gray, I had a quick question. So, I mean, there are many different people on this committee. I was just wondering, what are your jobs? And if you could just state your name and what you do.
Sure.
Could you go left
What,
to right?
I just own a bunch of commercial property,
All right. That's awesome.
and a farmer builder.
So I'm Joe Fontaine, I'm the conservation agent and the town planner for the town of Tewksbury. My job is to administer, enforce the Tewksbury Town Bylaw and the Wetland Protection Act for the commission. I'm basically a regulator, environmental regulator.
My name's Dan Ronan. I am the chair of the Conservation Commission, a job that I was only made aware of right before they voted to make me chair. But, you know, it's a fun time. But essentially, my job for this is to run the meetings. I can't make motions most of the time. That's why I've been asking other members to, I kind of set up the motion for them, but technically, I'm not allowed, so they're the ones who have to make the motions. But yeah, I run the meeting, and that's mostly it, along with reviewing all of the documents and stuff.
I'm Steve Gove, I lost a bet, so I have a background in building, and my primary job is I fix airplanes. So, and I have a passion for protecting the environment, so that's why I'm here.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else before we close the meeting?
Michael Batman Casey. So I know recently, relatively recently, Tewksbury had an issue where the main river where most of the drinking water comes from was found to have like too much organic compounds that had like exceeded contaminant levels. What has that been like fixed? What's the story on that?
I don't have any information specifically on that issue. I know Long Pond, which is like a mile away from where I live, that's had some issues with contamination and bacteria, and it's a cleanup process. Fortunately, I know most of the time that when you get something in the mail saying, oh, you know, there's some contamination in your drinking water, a lot of the times the quantities that they're talking about are like 50 parts per billion. I don't know if it's on that level, but it's very small, and when it goes over, they warn everybody, even though it might not be the biggest issue. It's not like drinking concentrated bacteria water. It's very, very, very diluted, but they still, thankfully, you know, stop it before it gets out of control. Joe, do you have any idea on that specific issue?
Are you referencing the Merrimack River?
Yes.
Yep. That's water treatment.
Yeah, so that doesn't fall in the commission's jurisdiction. The commission's jurisdiction is more concerned with like land disturbance that happens throughout town in wetland resource areas, although we still are interested in water quality for like Long Pond, for example, like we were just talking about. But as far as contaminant levels in drinking water resources, I would defer to our chemists at the water treatment plant. But so, sorry, that's basically no, we don't know.
Quite the answer, though, Joe. Right.
That sounded good.
Thank you for your interest.
Yes, thank you. Anything else? Not seeing anybody? Stand up. I will take a motion to close this meeting.
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Next meeting is April 19th, 2023. All right.